I have known Joan Hamburg for more years than either of us would like to admit. She's been on WOR for as long as I can remember. In fact, some of us call it WJH, not just WOR. I was thinking when Marcy Sims mentioned her an educated consumer is our best customer. I think Joan has done more to educate consumers in New York than anybody else other than possibly your father. For all those years that I've known Joan and her husband Skip, who I'm glad to see today, I've really admired her ability to talk knowledgeably about any subject. And having shared many meals with them, I can tell you she also has a good sense of food. But far more than that, she is an expert on everything that a consumer would want to know, shopping, nightlife. And she not only is personally an expert, but she also has the ability to attract everybody else who's an expert, celebrities, people who've written the definitive books on all kinds of things. And her program is one of those things that if you've started listening to it, it's hard not to continue. It's addictive. I could go on about all the awards and books that Joan has written, but Nancy said that she was trying to have this event end before noon. Did you say that? And the only way I could really, in fairness to Joan, tell everything she's done, I'd be still talking an hour from now at least. So I'm going to cut it short by saying I can't really think of any New Yorker, with the possible exception of Mayor Bloomberg, who is as deserving as Joan is for the honor of being the New Yorker of the Year. Joan.
I thought Tim was going to compliment me on my appetite, but he restrained. You know, I love this award, and I love hearing all of your stories, because no matter who's mentored us over the years, it's this great city that has made what's happened, whether we started hip-hop or clothing or restaurants, it's this great city that's made it all possible. Now, I didn't grow up in Manhattan. I grew up in a small town outside of Manhattan with a very large family, and every Saturday when I was a kid, my mom would take me into Manhattan, and she would just say, pick a theater. Prices were inexpensive. She didn't care about reviews. We just went to the theater, and we went out to lunch, and then we would explore neighborhoods. She was fearless. I fell in love. I fell in love with this great city. And then my love affair continued at Barnard College. We didn't have a bucolic campus for any of you who know that school, but we had Times Square, and we had Greenwich Village, and we had Little Italy, Harlem, streets filled with the sound of music, and streets just filled with the smell of wonderful ethnic cooking at every corner. And it was at Barnard I heard one of the recipients talk about 311 and say, do you remember there was life before 311? Well, believe it or not, my first book, which was started at Barnard, was called New York on $5 a day. It was possible. Believe me, you could eat a really good dinner with a cheap date for $5. You could go to theater free, go to concerts, and you could actually sleep over. If my folks knew the hotel rates when we were doing research, we went to every dump in town. But who knew? You know, I didn't grow up here. And when the cops would come in to bust the place, which happened many, many times, they would say, what are you doing here? And we would just look up, research, sir. So we learned early. And what happened with $5 a day is an only in New York story. We wrote the book There was a young lawyer called Arthur Froma who now works with us at WOR Radio. And Arthur had written a book called Europe on $5 a day because he wanted to pay back his Yale Law School tuition. So he writes this book. I used it when I was a kid traveling abroad. Wrote New York, call him up. I didn't know him. He was at a law firm. He didn't know me. Within 4 weeks, he went to his bank, raised $10,000, and we self-published this funny little book, which sold 35,000 copies in 2 months. It was like, voila, I'm a writer. You know, the book changed his life. He left his law firm and started what you all know is one of the most successful travel franchises in the world. And I went on to become an expert. Don't ask me at what. You know, radio people are the best to invite to cocktail parties. We can't talk about anything in 5-minute periods. So you want to invite us. We're great experts. But you know, I worked, because now I'm a writer, I worked for a major ad agency. And what better way to learn how to be in other people's shoes than to see them and see product through someone else's eyes. Campbell's Soup took me all over America. I was serving soup in Duluth, Minnesota. I didn't even know there was a place called Duluth, Minnesota in those days. The Olympics did not recognize it in those years. I worked with the then struggling artist, Andy Warhol, who in gratitude gave me one of his first tomato soup shopping bags. I brought it home. It looked good, but I didn't really realize what was going to happen to it. Put it on my kitchen table. My mom came over to babysit. It was raining. She took off her wet shoes and put them in my priceless work of art. She was not impressed at that time with Andy Warhol. But you know, I lived in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania for Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation. And I saw America as a tourist through the eyes of the Department of Commerce. But I always came back to where my heart was, New York City. I went off to New York Magazine, where a genius called Clay Felker from a little beachhead, a 1-bath townhouse, mentored all of us. And this is the reason I went to Radio Today. In New York Magazine, I wrote the weekend books, wrote stories about service, and Clay Felker said, we want you to audition for a radio show. At that time, they had a host who was considered politically incorrect, right? Before 311. Who knew what was going to happen? But I auditioned for this radio show, ended up getting the job, and the rest is history. 2-hour slot. And I took everything I learned about service, about the ability to find a little shop somewhere, a restaurant that maybe no one knew about, and to turn it into something very special and let people know what was out there. Now, the early years, for so many of us, you've heard all these stories, they weren't easy, especially for women, because we had young children, we had husbands, I was working all day, and because I was such a good girl, I came home and did the Malamar runs in the evening. Like so many women, we did it. We did it all. But because we didn't have a lot of expectations, we knew how to make it work. No life plan, just let it happen. Love your audience, love your market, love your listeners. I met and I heard Marcy, and I understand where she's coming from, and I know her dad, but the head of Sears Roebuck came in to lecture us one day at the radio station, and he told us at a sales meeting that he was a huge success. And everyone said, you know, why, what you buy? He said, no. My staff knows that every single shopper who comes in here, every customer, is my last customer. And I feel that way in the wonderful WOR Radio, which cares so much about community and the business community. Every listener is our last listeners. Now, the last few years have been tough, challenging for all of us. 9/11, maybe because the heart of the financial district is based right here, but still, with all the naysayers, the believers still come. They come from all over the world. They come fresh from college. They're all looking for what I looked for what all of you looked for, the dream, the future, the possibilities. We have had to learn new languages. Believe me, if I thought I'd be tweeting and on Facebook, it makes me crazy, but we're doing it. Every day we go online. I don't even use my land phone, I'm embarrassed to say, because this is the new tech language that we've had to adjust to, whether we're in business, whether we're broadcasters. This is our present, and this is the beginning of a future which we can't even fathom. So, the way you think about your customers, the way you think about your careers is all part of these times. Now, I talk to about 1 million people, maybe more, on a weekly basis. So many now want to know, how do I start a business? How do I increase my business? In fact, every Monday we have a series, many of you have been on it, called Launchpad. 12:30, my daughter Lizzie, who's an entrepreneur, we feature all over the area and all over the world entrepreneurs. We talk about success, we talk about failure. We love our stories. We met this woman. This is really, it makes me think, where have I been all these years? Debbie Meyer. Her mom was horrified when she would use a cake cutter, cut her cake, and then use her hands to lift the cake out of the thing. She thought it was awful. So Debbie, out of a little piece of steel, fabricated something called K-A-K-E, K-A-K-E-K-U-T-R, cake cutter. Took a little thing, took it to one of the shows at the Javits Center. The woman from QVC saw it. You will not believe. 40 products and $100 million later. It's like one of those, I could have done that, but we didn't. Small business represents more than 99% of all employers in this country. It generates, and it's hard to believe it, 60 to 80% of all the new jobs here. 1 in 10 adults have now started their own business. So for us, we work hand in hand with the business community. I started out my career telling people where to eat, where to go, and everyone is right. You wanted a bargain, you called Joan Hamburg. But what I hear my listeners say, and it's a lesson for all of us, is, yes, we want the best for less. We do. But more than that, we want service. We want to be treated like we're human beings. When we go into a restaurant, we don't want to be told the only reservation is 5 or 11, because we know it isn't true. We go into a shop. We want someone to say, let me help you. I remember when my mom had her own saleswoman at Loman's. A lot of you may remember those times. She'd get a call and say, bring the girls. We got a new shipment in the back. And my favorite Loman's story is my mom took me, and there was a dress hanging on a rack. I loved it. I put it on. I was born tall. Now I'm shrinking a little. And, excuse me, a woman came over to me and said, take off my dress. It was her dress. She hung it up. I put it on. It looked great. And the truth is, I would have bought it. So everything is perception. You know, I love this award because the Chamber has a commitment to each and every one of you, whether you started something small or you're one of these giant companies. Everyone here who has told about their life's dreams and life path, everyone here has left an indelible footprint. And that's what it's all about, to make a difference, to change people's lives, and to add to this great city. So I am honored to be in such good company and honored to be with all of you. Continued success. Thank you.
Pattie Design Productions for www.manhattancc.tv.